shot in the Senate. What is your 11th hour analysis of big hits and headlines for today?
I mean, certainly I think the consensus in Washington is a GOP House takeover. There's a slim chance that the Democrats will hold on to the House, but I mean, realistically, there's about 30 seats that are already gone. They've got a 39-seat cushion. You've got maybe 40 toss-ups. So just a few of those toss-ups go to the Republicans, and you've got a Republican House. Now, there are some people who say, you know, maybe a Republican House isn't that bad. I mean, obviously, that some people would sort of dismiss that as a cynical take, but for Democrats looking ahead to 2012, they need a foil for President Obama. One of the problems the Democrats have had is they haven't been able to say to the Republicans, okay, what would you do? They paint the Republicans as the party of no, but you know, the Republicans haven't been in a position where they've had to say this is how we would legislate. So some people argue that a 2012 race in which Republicans have had the House for a couple of years and they've had to sort of show their cards isn't a bad thing for the Democrats.
Here's a problem I've also heard analysts point out, though, for Democrats. Suppose the Republicans take the House and not the Senate. The Senate is still firmly enough in the hands of Democrats and President Obama is still president. Doesn't that still allow Republicans to say we have part of the show here, but not enough to really make the big difference we need?
Sure, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of that, but I mean, if people are paying attention to politics, they're going to understand, and I don't know that people are, but those people that are paying attention are going to understand that even in the Senate, if the Democrats have 52, 53 seats, which is realistically probably what they're going to end up with the filibuster, which means that 60 votes are necessary to pass really anything, and Republicans using the filibuster very frequently, the Democrats aren't really going to be able to do a lot in the Senate. Now, granted, that's a harder message, and a lot of people don't know what a filibuster is, so I think that your point is well taken, but certainly at least having the Republicans having a little bit of power will give President Obama a foil he hasn't had.
So with a GOP House, what would the impact be on President Obama's legislative agenda for those last couple of years and anything he's trying to get done?
Well, you know, the White House has said already we're going to be focused on the next 2 years in getting what we've done sort of moving forward. Whether you look at the health care legislation or you talk about the financial reform bill, which really you sort of have to write as you go along, even though they've already passed it. A lot of it's going to be about that. It's not going to be about big new legislative tools. What you are going to see is probably going to be about jobs. I mean, the one thing that the president's been really hurt on is the perception that he is not doing enough on the economy. Of course, there was a stimulus bill, but Republicans have been successful in deeming the stimulus bill a failure. So what you're going to see going forward is jobs-focused proposals. Now, what passes is another question. We also have to wonder if the Republicans do take the House, whether there's going to be a lot of subpoenas and investigations and that kind of thing, and we're going to return to sort of a more Clinton-era Congress versus the president investigative focus.
Everybody's wondering how the independents are going to vote for tomorrow. What is your take on that?
They're going to vote Republican. I mean, that's just the reality. We did a CBS poll with the New York Times last week, and it showed that Republicans are voting Republican, Democrats are voting Democrat, but all of these independents who helped President Obama in 2008 are switching over to the Republican Party. And I mean, if you want to look at the one factor that's going to decide this election, it's independents. Another thing I want to bring up, though, the Republican Party is not popular. Overall, among registered voters, the Democrats are actually more popular than the Republicans. But among likely voters, the people who are actually going to show up at the polls, that's where the GOP has the edge. And a lot of that is driven by independents.
If a Republican takeover of the Senate is unlikely, nonetheless, there are some fascinating races. Give me a couple of sentences on the ones that you're watching most carefully.
Well, I mean, Alaska has turned into this crazy race. We have this three-way race where Senator Lisa Murkowski, who lost in the primary, decided to run as a write-in candidate. Joe Miller, the Republican who won that race, has faced just a ton of bad press. I mean, there's video of him having his security forces arresting a reporter. He admitted to improperly polling on the job and then lying about it. It's just been a real bad run for him. And right now, I think the perception is that Murkowski's the front runner. But for Democrats, you've got this guy, Scott McAdams, who nobody even heard of, really. He was an afterthought type candidate because Alaska is such a red state. Suddenly they're seeing a little bit of an opportunity there. So there's a chance that Alaska now would have its second sort of mistake Democrat senator, if you will, after the Ted Stevens race previously. So that's an interesting race to watch. I could go on forever here, Sharyl, so stop me if you want.
Well, let me go ahead. I'm sorry, that's fascinating. I know you're posting more on CBSNews.com for people to see, but you also just posted a story on CBSNews.com about Sarah Palin in 2012. Why is she making headlines today?
Well, Sarah Palin, Politico ran a story that sort of said what everyone's been thinking in Washington, frankly, which is that Sarah Palin, as a 2012 presidential candidate, is a real risk, and Republicans are worried about her because while she is so exciting to the base and really generates a lot of enthusiasm on the Republican base, on the broader electorate, she's a hard sell. I mean, she's a very polarizing figure. A lot of people really don't like her, and if you want to win over some of the moderates and even some Democrats, maybe that have become frustrated with President Obama, you need a Republican who can do that. And a lot of Republican leaders don't see Sarah Palin as that Republican. I think for good reason. CBS News poll last month found only 22% favorable rating for Palin. She had a 50% unfavorable rating. Those are tough numbers if you want to be a nominee. But realistically, there's so much energy behind Palin that she could become the Republican nominee. I mean, look at someone like Christine O'Donnell, somebody who in a general election is not looking real good for tomorrow, but who was able to generate a lot of enthusiasm in the Republican base and beat out Mike Castle, a more establishment candidate in Delaware. You see that play out on a national scale, and it could be real bad news for the Republicans. And that's what this Politico story talked about. It talked about how a lot of Republicans behind closed doors are trying to do everything they can to have it not be Sarah Palin as their nominee in 2012.
And yet they have to tread carefully when criticizing her publicly because of that base of support she has among certain people, as you said.
Right. You do not want to be the establishment alternative to Sarah Palin. I mean, look at somebody like Mitt Romney, who's sort of teetering on the edge of being defined very much as an establishment candidate. Romney does not want to be that and have the grassroots really working against him. So that's why all the sources in this story were anonymous. Now, Palin was quick to pick up on that the fact that the sources were anonymous. She said that her critics should man up and should, come out publicly and say these things. But no Republican wants to come out against Sarah Palin. The risks are too high. But behind closed doors, there's a lot going on to try to find a way to have it be anyone but Palin in 2012.
Brian Montopoli, thank you. You're awesome. Appreciate the information download.
Thank you.